how did you feel when you first played Tears of the Kingdom and there was no whistle sprinting existing? You know, okay, it's funny. So I didn't stream my very, very first playthrough. Well, sort of. I did one offline playthrough, which basically what I did was I went around the game to pick up all the memories so that I couldn't be spoiled on, like, the cutscenes. Does that make sense? So the actual, like 99% of the shrines and, like, the dungeons and stuff, those were first time on stream. But I played through, like, a part of the game so I could get all the memories and stuff, so I couldn't get spoiled. Either way. So that playthrough probably took me about 15 hours to do offline. And I gotta be honest with you, I hated it. I hated Tears of the Kingdom when I started playing it. I thought this game was dog shit when I started playing it. I despised Tears of the Kingdom. The first, like, 15, 20 hours of me playing this game, I thought it was a pile of trash. Despite me saying now that it's probably my favorite or one of my favorite Zelda games of all time, the first 15, 20 hours, I hated it so much. I can't explain to you, it wasn't just, like, one thing. It was just a combination of things. The way I can explain it is, like, right at the beginning, I think there's a combination of reasons. So first, because I played so much Breath of the Wild, I hated everything that was different. Does that make sense? Even if it was better, I just didn't like the change. Does that sort of make sense? Like, the mechanics that were changed, I didn't like, because I was obviously used to it. So, like, that was, like, one small part of it. And I constantly attempted to, like, whistle sprint, tap sprint. It didn't work, and it bothered me a lot. And also, I didn't like, when I started the game, the new mechanics. And I actually will stand by that opinion for one reason. I think that the new mechanics, when you start the game, at least in my opinion, are very underwhelming, and it's not until you have more hours in the game when you really actually get to, really explore the inner depths of the mechanics where you start to appreciate them more. Does that make sense? Because when I started playing this, I kind of was just like, I mean, I guess this building thing is kind of cool, but it's just kind of like whatever. Okay, cool. I can put a little glider thingy here on top of this raft. Okay, that's nice. Okay, I can combine two of these wooden logs to build a bridge. Okay, sure. Like, for me, that was not, like, that cool. Like, I was just kind of like, eh. Like, it was very meh to me. But once I'd gotten further in and I started realizing how much you could build and how different what you were building was costing and this was the big change, that everything can be solved in 50 different ways because of all the tools you have, that's where made me actually start to appreciate this a lot more. And then I think the last thing that really made me dislike Tears of the Kingdom for my first playthrough, and I stand by this still right now, I still think this was terrible, was that early game in this game is so long. Like, even for a first-time playthrough, I think this early game is too long, in my opinion. I just think they should have shortened the early game. In my opinion, this early game is just way too long. It's just too much. It's like the Great Plateau, the Great Sky Island, like the Sky Island I'm on right now. In my opinion, it takes, like, a very, very long time to go through as a casual, and I found it to be kind of boring and restrictive. And here was my other issue with Tears of the Kingdom. And I think this was, like, another thing I didn't like when I started. Great Sky Island takes, as a casual, from what I've seen, I would say the average for a first-time playthrough is roughly around 3 hours or so. I've seen some people take about 2, and I've seen some people take up to about 5. So I would say the average is usually around 3 hours. That's usually what I see most people take on their first playthrough on this game. And that's a fairly long time for the tutorial part of the game, but whatever. But here's where I kind of, like, come into another issue. Once you are off the Sky Island, in my opinion, the game is still too slow and boring. Because, like, you then have to spend even more time to get your paraglider, which by the way, I still think they should have just given you the paraglider the second you got off the Sky Island. I get that that's because they want to make sure you go and activate the lookout landing, but I still think they should have given you the paraglider at the end here. But either way, so then you have to go through that. For casual, probably going to take you 30, 40 minutes, whatever. Then when you have that, here's the thing I want to say, and this was, like, another reason I didn't like the early game. This is also why I'm getting to, by the way, I'm saying all the negatives. I have a lot of positives coming out. By the way, like I said, this is one of my favorite Zelda games. I'm just mentioning my first playthrough experience. And then here's the last thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way on my first playthrough, chat, okay? which was this. When I initially dropped down, I started to kind of feel like this is just Breath of the Wild with a few changes. Because I started to play the game the same way I had for Breath of the Wild in the beginning. Does that make sense? Because I had played Breath of the Wild so much. And it wasn't until I had gotten a few hours in where I finally started to embrace the new system and I started going into new areas where I finally felt like, oh, this isn't just a reskin DLC for Breath of the Wild. This is its own thing. Which is also why I was one of the only people who kind of defended people's take when they said, this just feels like a Breath of the Wild DLC to me. I actually completely can understand why someone thinks that if they're not far into the game. Does that make sense? Because you can make the experience in the beginning very similar to Breath of the Wild. Like, if you go through the Sky Island, you're going to be like, okay, this is a reskin of the Great Plateau. And then you get down, and then you get the paraglider, and then you start running around, like, on Hyrule Field, for example. And honestly, we can all agree, some areas in the game are very similar to Breath of the Wild, and some are very different. Hyrule Field, where you initially start the game, is extremely similar to Breath of the Wild, right? So, I would say I was very negative about this game until I was honestly about 10, 15 hours in. That's when I started to, like, really like this game. Like, I really like it. So, and now, if I'm being honest with you, I don't think I could ever go back to casually playing Breath of the Wild again. I actually think that, casually speaking, Breath of the Wild now feels very, 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 very low tier. Because speedrunning is different. But casually speaking, the overworld feels so empty and barren in Breath of the Wild now when you've done Tears of the Kingdom. Do you know what I mean? Like, it really just feels like there's nothing going on. There's not much you can do. And there's just, like, 2 or 3 things. Without glitches, it feels so much more limiting. Kind of just like, whatever. I actually, you know what? I see some people say that they got tired of exploring the depths, and I agree. I think the depths is fun until you decide you want to try and complete the map. I think depths were really fun until I decided to 100% the depths. It was fun to temporarily go down, explore a bit, and then go back to the overworld. But when I decided, okay, I'm going to 100% this. So I'm going to go around and, like, get everything. So I would spend, like, 6-7 hours around there. I was like, ugh. But that could also be just because I'm sure you probably picked up on this at this point if you've listened to opinions. The depths is really just about, things taking a while. And that's just not really how a speedrunner goes. You know what I mean? Like, for a speedrunner, it's just not really that interesting to me. What I ended up doing to get the depths was I just basically made a hover bike, and I just flew from light route to light route once I had gotten more of the shrines, so it was easy to find them. Also, chat, we're finally about to be done with the early game, and we can get into the more fun stuff. I am so excited. I am so done doing early game. Oh my goodness.